Bro. Hello, gamers. Hi, Andre. Oh, changed nickname. Okay. Oh, no, I cannot be mad about people watching my stream. Other streams. Come on. It's nice to see that there are more people actually streaming in the general free and open source software community. I mean, in my case, I was going a little bit weird after like 2 years of pandemic, so streaming was a way to, I don't know, fake a little bit of working with other people. I wouldn't be surprised if I were the only one feeling this way. But yeah, it's good to see that other people are experimenting with streaming. It's kind of an interesting thing to do in terms of outreach. Yeah. There are like a few other people streaming in the GNOME community as well. Aside from George's, there are a couple of other people. Evaluating GDK4 hit. Well, hopefully. I mean, it's part of the goal to make GDK4 and libadwaita a little bit more known. There isn't much out there outside of the usual YouTube videos made by people that are covering the community, mostly mining for drama. You have to get that viewers count up and those impressions as well. So I'm not surprised that every single thing gets mined for controversy these days. But yeah, I just wanted to put out some more information and some useful thing about what the GNOME project is doing. That is not making a video and putting it on YouTube and explaining to people from edited video side. At least I'm not using, I don't know, cute anime girls or loud music to explain what I'm doing. So, I don't know. I hope people come out of my streams and the VODs with a little bit more understanding on how GNOME works. I'm referring to certain channels that won't be named. Oh, hi, Nugget. You want to start collaborating, but you don't know where to start. So, the GNOME community, if you want to start collaborating, has an entire page about newcomers to the project. So you can start by going to that page, which is on the wiki, and it's under newcomers, and basically tells you how to download and install Builder, and then use it to clone a project, build it, and then basically just go on GitLab, find a few issues that are interesting to you, that are marked as newcomers, and then start working on them, or triage bugs, or join the chat channel if there is one for that project. It could be better. I will say this. It was written, I don't know how many years ago, probably 5 or 6 years ago, maybe more. Let me double check, because it's been a while. So there's this page here. Yeah. And it will tell you how to choose a project, how to build it, how to solve a task, and how to submit a fix. This is very much contribution pipeline. So you don't just want to collaborate to a free software project, but you also want to fix something, or you want to implement something. But okay, it was last edited in 2018. Okay, so it's pretty much when it was made. So it's 4 years old, ish. It's probably a little bit older than that. Let me see. It's a little bit older than that. It's I mean, it's a good page for what it does. Let me see. Yeah, it's definitely older than that. It's probably like, yeah, 2014. So it's almost 10 years old. So the overall design for that page was, I want to contribute to GNOME. I want to do something with it. I want to learn how to write code, or learn how to fix a bug, or learn how to basically scratch my itch. Which is kind of how a lot of people that contribute to GNOME and free software in general have been introduced to the larger community. I started contributing to my first free software project back in 1999 because I needed to fix something, and I needed to implement a new feature for I'm going to date myself pretty much. I was using Usenet at the time, pretty much all the time. So, and then I switched to Linux in late 1997. And the end result was that I started using Usenet readers for Linux, and I switched between a couple of them, and then I ended up on one which was it's still there. It's called SLRN. And one of the things that I did was contribute extensions to that Usenet reader at the time. And after that, I started like learning C and writing patches for that program. And it was all to scratch my own itch. That's how everything starts. I didn't like something, or something didn't work like I wanted, so I provided a fix. Or at least I talked to people on how to provide a fix. And the end result is that after that, I switched to learning other languages apart from C, so Perl and Python, and then I started contributing GNOME to the language bindings. Next year is going to be my 20th bugversary or patchversary for GNOME. So next year is going to be 20 years since I contributed my first patch to GNOME. But again, it was mostly how to fix something that I was trying to use and didn't work. So the newcomers page on the wiki is kind of that, is essentially a way to pipeline people that want to fix something, that want to implement something, want to fix a bug or implement a feature, and this is how you do it. You should go from 0 to having a project in front of you that you can modify. Which is one thing that you can do in free software. We concentrate a lot on the software side of things, but there are other things that people can do. There is, for instance, the documentation, which I'm currently working on. There is design. There is, well, documentation can be user documentation, which we are impressively understaffed. But at least we have a few people that still care about the documentation for users. And then there's the developer documentation. And for developer documentations, technically speaking, there's me. I'm not the only one writing developer documentation. For instance, a lot of the maintainers for libraries in GNOME write the developer documentation for their own libraries. But for instance, the reason why I'm working on developer documentation as a general topic is for people that are new to the platform and want to use it to make their own application instead of working on GNOME. So there are many ways in which you can start collaborating. You can start collaborating by contributing GNOME, and you would be welcome. You can join the newcomers channel on the Matrix server for GNOME or IRC. Though I recommend Matrix for somebody who is not, I was going to say a hardcore nerd, but if you're not already on IRC, I strongly recommend joining Matrix. You can go to gnome.element.io and register an account, I think, or if you can't do that, then just register on Matrix and then join the newcomers channel on the GNOME server. Or you can join discourse and answer questions or ask questions there. It's our web forum that replaced most of our mailing lists. Yeah, it's kind of scary how things have changed in the past 20 years. 20 years ago, you had mailing lists with a lot of traffic at the time. And you had RSC, you had CVS for source for revision control, and you had Bugzilla for issue tracking. These days, we are a little bit more modern, I think. But yeah, if you want to contribute to GNOME, you have that particular avenue of contribution, that particular pipeline. Go to the newcomers page on the wiki, follow it, go on GitLab, find the bugs that are marked as newcomer, as good first bug or newcomer friendly, or there are a couple of tags there. And instead, if you don't want to contribute, well, I'd strongly recommend contributing to GNOME, but of course. But you also can contribute to GNOME by writing applications and by getting on the This Week in GNOME newsletter, which is not really a newsletter, it's a blog, but the overall idea is that you can use it to publicize what you're doing within the GNOME community and the larger community of people that develop targeting GNOME. And yeah, it's yeah, it's a there are many ways to contribute to GNOME that are not strictly speaking, here's a text editor, here's a toolchain and a programming language, now go. You can do much more than that. And also, again, you can join in terms of social, like you can join the various matrix or C channels and just stay in the background and learn about the community. It's one of the things that I used to do back in the day. I was lurking around in IRC channels and mailing lists, and I was trying to understand how the community worked, what were the interactions, the various ways that people use to communicate among themselves, between peers, between newcomers, and between people that were already there for a while. There's also the possibility of joining one of the outreach programs that exist these days. One is the Google Summer of Code if you're a student, of course. One is the Google Summer of Code, and the other one is the Outreachy program. Usually GNOME takes part in both. So if you're a student and you want to start contributing, those are reasonable ways to join the project. The important thing is not to do that just because they look good on your resume. I mean, that's one of the reasons, but personally, I find it a little bit disingenuous. Mostly because a lot of people just join and then finish their contribution, then just disappear. Which, I mean, I don't expect people to stick around forever. And nobody does. But the there is a little bit of sadness when that happens. It feels okay. It feels okay when you're doing it when you go to intern for a company, right? For a commercial company, you go and intern with them for 3 months, 6 months, whatever, and then you leave. And there's no expectation of any relationship after that particular period of time because it's a commercial company. If they wanted you, they could hire you. You're just doing there because, again, there is an expectation of increasing the your job experience and in general your training. When it comes to free software project that is maintained by volunteers and it's essentially just a massive social experiment with no compensation whatsoever. It's like going to volunteer at the, I don't know, at a animal shelter, or you go to volunteer to a homeless shelter, or like volunteer to the free clinic or whatever. You go there not because you're padding your resume. You go there because you have some sort of affinity with the end goal of the project, or at the least the values of the project. So if then you just stay there for 3 months and leave like nothing happened, it stings a little bit. So I guess that's why I'm not 100% sold on the Summer of Code internships. The outreachy ones are a little bit better. They have a higher level of, I was going to say resonance with the goals of a free software project, mostly because it's a non-profit and it's another kind of social venture. It's not a commercial entity that it's doing this. Outreachy has a strong ethical mission, which is to increase the diversity in the free software community. So the people that go there are usually a little bit more in tune with that kind of I would say that kind of mission, so those kind of values. Whereas people that get inside the Google Summer of Code see Google and then go, oh my god, it's Google, it's great on my resume because I can say I was in the Google Summer of Code. I can brag about it. I mean, yeah, people can brag about it. Especially for projects like GNOME that deeply care about the quality of the contributions. The GNOME project tends to see potential Summer of Code interns as real contributors, so they will ask you to get involved with projects, start contributing before even the Summer of Code starts. So there is an attempt being made at introducing you to the community before you get parachuted into a project. No, I don't know if that answered your question, but I think my main point about this, how to start collaborating within GNOME, is you don't strictly need to be a coder, and you don't strictly need to jump through a ton of hoops to do that. Sometimes just joining the chat is enough, and start listening to what happens there, start posing questions, start asking, start looking at resources on the wiki, on the developer website. And yeah, if anything is unclear, you can join the newcomers channel and ask your questions there. Most of the time you will get an answer pretty quickly. So that's usually a good start. Ooh. Oh, no worries. So I hope everyone had a really good week. Since we are Friday and the week is almost over, I couldn't make it to on Wednesday for a stream. I was out during, well, not during the time where I usually do the stream, but right before that, and I had to leave the house pretty quickly. So I couldn't have done a full stream, probably just like an hour or half an hour. But I wasn't completely off. So I still worked during Wednesday on the Getting Started tutorial. Now, the Getting Started tutorial is starting to take shape. Basically what I've done is I've taken the little application that I wrote during last week and unpacked it. So I started from the very initial state, that is what GNOME Builder generates when you create a new project. And then I started to add pieces to it and then describe what I was adding and doing, which is essentially just reverse engineering my streams about writing a GNOME application. But in the end, the actual result was fairly good, if I say so myself. Let me see if I have a link now. So let me switch to my desktop. So let's see. So let's go inside the developer documentation project on GitLab, and then we go inside the merge requests. So I already opened a merge request here. It's in draft form. Oh, thanks Warstream TV for joining, for following me. Yeah, I open a merge request mostly because I want a remote render of the changes that I'm making. Right now it's just a bunch of fix-up commits, so I haven't even rebased it. But let's go inside the CI artifacts and see a render of the current state of the tutorial. So we start with the getting started page. The landing page is here. Oh, thank you. So the getting started page, I edited it a little bit, so in the end you get into the you get a text viewer example so that we can follow along. So instead of having like an example app, I renamed everything using the application ID and the application name and the project name that I used during the streams for the text viewer application. And I modified the references to the various files that are provided by GNOME Builder. In the meantime, I also modified GNOME Builder to fix a couple of things in the template that we discovered during our streams, especially one on I think last Friday and this Monday. So mainly some of the naming here and there. I did some changes to the Python template as well, so that is a little bit more it conforms a little bit more to what other languages, other templates are doing. Like for instance the, let me see, GNOME Builder merge requests. Right, so there are a couple of fixes here, mainly for the C and Python templates that I've done. For instance, yeah, one of the things that I removed that we found out a few streams ago, well, a couple streams ago, which was the hard-coded default width and default height of the window that were set when we created a window instead of being set inside the user definition file. Oh, hi, Squaremo. Never heard of GNOME IDE. This is GNOME Builder, which is the GNOME IDE. I use it here because it's a lot easier to follow along on stream. because it has terminal here, the build stuff, and also because it's a lot easier to follow, to write documentation when you have a standard tool. I mean, it would be theoretically possible to just write a getting started documentation that didn't assume you're using any specific text editor or IDE or any build system or any distribution. It would be, again, yes, theoretically possible. It would be a struggle. It would not be fun in any way, shape, or form. And it would also break pretty much instantaneously. So I prefer pointing people to the tools that we provide that are standardized and we can all agree how they work and what they do. Hi, Teddy. Excited for GTK Builder and libpanel. Yeah, I'm excited too. I really hope for GNOME 43 to have a GTK4 version of GNOME Builder. I'm not going to hold anybody to any timeline for that. It's a complicated piece of machinery. There are a lot of moving parts, so maybe we'll have to wait another cycle on top of that. But I'm excited too. Went through NetBeans, Eclipse, IntelliJ, and VS Code. Yeah, I went to those as well. Well, not NetBeans, but definitely Eclipse and IntelliJ. And I used a little bit of VS Code. Generally speaking, you will find most of my time I spend it in Vim on a terminal. But every time I need to use anything that is related to GTK, not writing GTK code, but literally GTK code, but writing application, I will default to Builder because it's a lot better. There's nothing else that compares. It handles all the dependencies by itself, all the templating and everything else. It's a lot better. So yeah, I have a couple of I've done a couple of fixes here and there. I need to no, I didn't get a notification for this, probably because I'm not watching this repository. No, annoying. But I have to fix a couple of these things. But yeah, basically what I've done was trying to figure out the changes to the templates that I had to make for the tutorial. And after that, I basically started from scratch, taking the GNOME application that I wrote on stream and describing what I've done. The complicated part is trying to... So this is the complicated part of writing documentation for how to start writing an application. You have to write an application first. And then you have to deconstruct what you've done so that you can write instructions on how to rebuild the application that you've just written. The other important part is providing a bunch of examples, reference to the documentation, references to the changes that you're making. All in incremental steps. So no meandering around like I did on stream. But yeah, overall the idea is that yeah, I'll have to add a couple of links to the template documentation. But overall, at the end of each page, you should be able to run, well, do the modifications that are listed here, run it, and get the application that you see in the state that you see at the top. And then you move to the next section and you follow all the other bits, like adding the action here, well, adding the button, adding the action. There's another thing that I have to fix inside the template. Currently, the C template is leaking memory because the action isn't owned by the action map. You need to release the reference. Yeah, and basically explain the various parts, the various moving parts of how to make this application work. And at the end, you should have this. And now I was working on the showing the cursor position page. Then I will switch to how to save the content to a separate file, how to save the application state. I'm not going to... So the example application that I wrote last week was predicated on having libadwaita. And technically speaking, the documentation assumes that the application is using libadwaita. But until GNOME 42 is out, so until March, I cannot tell people to follow exactly this getting started documentation, including adding calls to libadwaita, because the tutorial, well, sorry, not the tutorial, the template that GNOME Builder will use to generate the application will include libadwaita before that. So if I reference like the toast overlay or the style manager API and you try to add it, stuff will break. And then I have to explain how to add a dependency and blah, blah, blah. And there should be no need whatsoever to do that. So I'm going to wait until I can modify the default template for GNOME applications in GNOME Builder to use the GNOME 42 runtime, which includes libadwaita. And once we have left libadwaita, then I can add the extra pages that I'm well, I haven't written yet, but I have the how's it called, the stream that describes them, essentially. And thanks for the follow, Squirmo. So yeah, I think this is kind of the current state of affairs. So as you can see, I was already writing the cursor position page here. There are a couple of things that happened in a different order during the stream, so I have to rebuild them, rearrange them a little bit. Even for the opening file page, I had to change a couple of things there. Yeah, for instance, okay, let me switch to the text viewer application. So in the original stream, I did a couple of things there. One was that I used the open button directly using the click signal instead of using it. Well, connecting to the click signal so that I could handle the button by itself. But in reality, modern applications should not be doing that. Should be using actions instead. Where am I applied to be a GNOME dev? You don't really apply to be a GNOME dev. You just show up. Everyone shows up, pretty much. You just join the Matrix channels for newcomers, and then you read discourse, the various topics there. You, I don't know, you just follow that. Oh yeah, the mod deletes links to website outside of specific set of places. Not much I can do. Yeah, the wiki does not count. But yeah, you can basically just go here. There you go. wiki.gnome.org/newcomers. Yeah, you can also get involved. Just go on the gnome.org website, and there are a bunch of places there. The gnome.org website is fairly up to date, and it's kind of well done. So should be possible to just get there and find all the places where we hide out. Yeah, actions. So widgets can be bound to an action. Yeah, well, let's see here. So instead of having like an object here, like a GTK button inside the header bar for the open action here, so you press open and the file selection dialog pops up, and we don't care about it. One way is to literally connect to the clicked signal on the GTK button, which is emitted every time you press the button. But again, modern applications do not really need that unless it's a very specific kind of behavior that you want to include. It's mostly, I wouldn't say legacy, but it's not entirely necessary. One thing you can do instead is to associate an action to the button. A GTK button is an actionable widget. Let me see if I can get you. Yeah. So GTK button implements GTK actionable. An actionable widget is a way to associate a widget to an action. An action is a name. So every time you activate the action, it's essentially the same as clicking the button. So instead of having a clicked signal handler, we associate an action here, and then inside the application, inside the window, we create an open action, which we already have to do in general because of other reasons. But for instance, if we decided to put this action inside the menu, it's not there, but we could put an open action here. So you need to define an action for the menu anyway. Otherwise, you just create an action, you add it to the window here, And then if you want to have a shortcut, if you want to have a keyboard shortcut like Control O, then you go to the application and you set the accelerator for that action here. So set accels for action on the application, on the GTK application instance, and then specify the action name with the namespace here, win, and then you define the shortcut that you want to use. And that's it, really. Now every time you either press the open, you either click the open button or you use Control O, you get the exact same result. And you don't have to define a signal callback for the button itself. But also it acts as a little bit as a model, essentially. So you can have multiple UI elements that are activated by the same action. So in this case, it's not really useful, but you might have a menu item for the open action, a button. You can have another shortcut. You can expose that as part of the actions available to the application itself. So right now I use the set accels for action. I used a window action, so window open, because I register it on the window itself. But in theory, I could add it to the application instance instead of the window instance. And adding it to the window, to the application instance, would allow me to activate the application again and create a new window, and create a new window that opens a specific file, for instance, instead of tying it to the window. So the main difference between the two is that an action on the application is meant to be global, so it affects the application as a whole. In this case, for instance, we have application quit, which means that it will quit the entire thing. Or we have the about action. In theory, we could have the preferences action. Again, those apply to the application as a whole. And then you have per window specific actions. In this case, open, save as, because what you're doing is affecting just a window. If you open a file, the window will be changed. If you save it, the window will be changed. And not the rest of the application. In this case, this application only has one window, so window action and application actions are pretty much interchangeable. So it doesn't entirely matter. Except in one case, which is being able to call these actions remotely. But that is a fairly complex topic and not an entirely useful one, because there are lots of moving parts there that are not entirely clear at the moment at a design level. So there used to be a lot more difference back when we used to have an entire menu here and expose the whole menu of an application over the session bus, so that, for instance, Unity could render it. So that is kind of different. So I'm not going to touch that. But yeah, all this stuff was covered in part by the stream on, I think, Wednesday. Like last Wednesday. But while writing the documentation to that, well, Wednesday and today, I realized that there were a couple of things that could have been changed. One of them was using explicit action on the window. Sorry. Instead of using a signal handler for the button. It's the kind of stuff that you notice only when you go over the code that you've written and you realize, hey, I could have done this a little bit better, which is fine. It's also one of the reasons why all of this stuff is free software, really. So other people can go over it and say, this could have been done a little bit better. Yeah, another thing that I noticed while going over the code here was that, okay, when we open the file and we read the contents, on failure we bail out and it's fine, then we validate the contents of the file to be UTF-8 encoded, because GTK only accepts UTF-8 strings for the UI parts, and text files can have any encoding whatsoever. Then we get the contents here. We get the buffer, which is the object that holds the text. Then we set the contents of the buffer to have the contents of the file. Then we move the cursor at the beginning of the file. And that's it, really. Then the old code used to take the file that we opened and extracted the base name, so the very last component of the path, and then put the that base name into the title of the window, which is fine for people that have a file system that uses UTF-8 as the character encoding for files and paths. Sadly, while everyone should be doing that, it's not entirely correct. On Unix, paths are in what is called the OS encoding. So it's basically just a whatever fits into a null terminated byte array. It doesn't have any specific encoding. The encoding is entirely implicit on whatever the user is using for their applications. As long as it's representable by a byte string, it's fine. On the other hand, as I said, GTK only allows UTF-8 for the text components of its widgets and its data types, which means that we cannot just pass the base name of the file as the title of the window. We have to ask the virtual file system inside GIO to get us what is called the display name. The display name is the name of the file as it is, but converted into UTF-8, possibly, well, likely in a lossy format. So it might drop a bunch of stuff, might replace stuff that is not representable in UTF-8 in using a tofu box. So the little white square glyph, or the question mark glyph. So instead of just getting the base name, we really have to use gfile query info to get the display name attribute. Luckily, it's still simple because we don't need to go into an asynchronous like operation for that, because we just opened the file, so the information is going to be cached. It's going to be cached, but at the very least by the kernel, so it's going to be pretty much available almost instantaneously. It's also going to be just a path operation, so we'll take the path, it will chop it up, take the last element, try to convert it into UTF-8 in a lossy way, and then put it back into a gfile-info data structure. And then we can, this one is a constant time accessor. So it's not going to be, unlike loading the content of a file, we don't need to go fully asynchronous. It's going to be fast enough as not to block the main loop. So, but yeah, it's something that I noticed when I was going over the code. You really need to not just get the base name, but you need to get the actual data here. I actually, yeah, now that I notice, it should be done a lot earlier because we have a couple of error paths inside our code that need to be resolved that way. So we will need to move this, and I will need to modify. Let's see. Yeah, we will need to do this here. Okay, so we'll load the contents here. But before doing error checking, we also do this. And then we will do let's do this. Display name. So we will do this. Otherwise, this is not real. So this is kind of a fallback. Is a really. Let me see if I can duplicate that. Okay. Where are you? Let's see. So in case of error, then we have to figure out something. Let's see. Do we have a duplicate attribute? Nope, I have to copy it myself. Fine, I'll do it myself. And then I have to turn this from a const to an auto free variable. And then we have to remove the base name. This one is going to be an error on the terminal. So since it's an error on the terminal, we don't really care about UTF-8. It's gonna go on the terminal anyway. But in the example code, we use toast, and the toast will use it will be displayed on screen, which means on the actual GUI. So we need to have a UTF-8 string there. And the same goes for this. So for this one, we can load the contents of and same here, instead of the base name, we have to use the display name. And here we can cut all of the stuff there. So yeah, when the load operation, the asynchronous loading operation is complete, what we do is we have to tell the system that we've it needs to finish the operation and give us the contents and the length of the contents. Again, this is going to be Unicode data, has to be Unicode data, even though it's strictly speaking not true, but then we validate it here, so we verify that we are actually getting UTF-8 encoded data inside a text file. Because otherwise it gets really complicated. You have to create a user part of your UI that says the data that you asked me to load doesn't seem to be encoded using UTF-8. Do you want to change the encoding and try to load something else? Try to do something else like ISO 8859 dash whatever, or any other encoding format that is not UTF-8. But that requires a little bit more nuance in how the entire thing is structured. You basically have to load all the data first, and then you have to present the user with a UI that lets the user change the encoding used, at which point then you have to call the conversion API and using a specific encoding, then so that we can turn whatever encoding you specified into UTF-8 so that we can load it. But for a simple text viewer, we can skip it. We finish the content. Before going into error handling, we also query the display name attribute, and we store it here. And then we do error handling first in case we actually couldn't open the file at all. For instance, the operation was cancelled. Oh, thanks, Versha. Thanks for the follow. Like the operation was cancelled by something. You are trying to load a file from a network share, and the network went down midway through, for instance. Then we do validation, and in case of an error, we bail out. And if everything succeeded, then we fill the content, we fill the buffer with the contents of the file, and we update the title of the window. So no more conditional stuff. If we arrived at this point, it means we have a display name, we have the contents of the file, and everything else. So which is kind of, so this approach of dealing with the failures first and leaving the optimal path at the end of the function is preferred. Let's just say that, especially in GNOME. Otherwise, so the typical approach would be, if this call was successful, then enter into a branch and then do this call, and then if this call is successful, enter another branch and then do the validation, and if the validation is successful, and at the end of the day you would get like a pyramid of like a heavily nested pyramid, kind of a triangle, actually, not a pyramid, because it would be half a half a pyramid. You get a triangle that goes from the top here, with minimal indentation level, to the bottom here with the maximum indentation level. Instead, what you want to do is bail out early, as early as possible, as fast as possible, in case of error. And then when you get to the bottom of the function, you actually are left with the success case only. So it's easy to deal with it because you can see it completely here. It also allows you to do things like auto cleanup variables here. So the gautofree and gautopointer macros will tell the compiler that when the display name variable or the info variable go out of scope, they have to be freed and collected. Like in this case, gautofree will free the display name variable, or the gautopointer gFileInfo, when the scope ends, the file info object will be unrefed. So the reference will be dropped, which allows you to keep the error code paths a lot simpler to follow. You don't have to do like manual free, or one thing that a lot of people do in C is not use those macros, but then go to out, then have a out here, an out label that does like g3 and then the object on ref, and so on and so forth. But that requires you to read ahead, and it's not great. It's not a great thing to follow. It makes the code a lot more complex, because it's basically you're reading here, and then you have a go to out, and then you have to scroll at the very bottom, and then scroll back, and then scroll again, and then scroll back, and it makes the code harder to follow. Whereas here, if we bail out early and we use the auto pointer and auto free macros, then we simply return as fast as we can. And again, this leaves the success code path at the bottom and self-contained. So basically, you can follow here and then skip to the end. And this is the success path. If everything goes right, you end up here, and then then the function returns. Done. Yeah, so I'll have to actually modify the content view, probably, yeah. No, the opening files are here. So the opening file should not be doing this. Yeah. Do this, and then instead of doing this, we do this one. Explaining equals. We have to duplicate here the string because, and this is the annoying part. So gfile info get attribute string returns a constant value because the string is actually stored inside the gfile info object. But gfile get base name duplicates the string for us. So if we're using the display name, we cannot have a const char here, otherwise we're gonna leak the memory from gfile. Even though we don't use it elsewhere, it's better to have that. So there is no technical reason why we, at this point in the getting started tutorial, we should use this at this point. Instead of putting it here. But once we arrive at the lesson or chapter about adding the toast, the window, so sorry, not gfile info, gfile So once we get to the point where we have to introduce toasts, I'm going to show them here. Didn't open. Let's see if I can get another one. Yeah, I don't see it. It's too fast. Oh yeah, no, actually, I didn't add that. So it's gonna be here. So at some point we will have to add a toast for communicating that the loading sequence was successful. Like this, and then we do g auto free our message g string duplicate printf. then we put display name here. So let's run it again. Right. Yeah. So there's the toast here. So at some point in the tutorial, we will have the session on adding a toast for success. At which point we will have the display name here at the very bottom, but also we'll have the toast for the error paths, which means that we will have to move the query info call from the bottom here to the top here. And I don't like moving code inside examples. Just say you're building up an application from an empty template, like not a completely blank canvas, but from a very basic template. Once you do that, you only have the option of adding stuff, of building on top of other stuff, which is one of the reasons why writing a getting started tutorial is complicated. You have to figure out the sequence of operations to build up your application at the very end, so that you have the exact result you want to present at the very end of the process. But also you have to go back to prepare every single step so that it's purely additive to the previous step. You cannot get to step 5 and then say, okay, now go back to what you've done in step 3 and delete this bit of code and then add or move it somewhere else, because that makes it confusing. People lose their position inside the sequence. It's like saying you're halfway through a Lego set. Now go back to like a third or a quarter into the instructions, then take and disassemble part of what you've done and build it in a different way. That's kind of nonsensical. That breaks the entire thing. So when we get to this point, we need to have a functioning example that we can then build upon without modifying anything else. Yeah. Yeah, so we get to this point. Yeah. So the opening files should be fine now, because now everything should be validated to be UTF-8 and should be okay. We retrieve the text buffer, set the text, place the cursor at the beginning, and change the title. Okay. We also probably want to here. Yeah, that's fine. The action is here. The accelerator is here. Open button is here. Okay. Yeah, this should be fine now. So the cursor position is a little bit different. So let's go back to the cursor position. We have to go here. And inside the text viewer window instance initialization function, we need to connect to the cursor position notify signal of the buffer, of the text buffer. So let's say in the text viewer, oh no, first, yeah, we need to add, yeah, we need to add the label to the text viewer window instance in order to bind the label widget that we acquire from a template into the class itself. So we need to do what we did with the content view. Basically the same thing. So in the class initialization function, of the viewer window. Yes. No, this is the next step. The following step, the previous step is you now must add the new member to the text viewer window instance structure for the cursor was label. So it's going to be code block C. We already had emphasize lines. Take this. So the G settings bit is unneeded currently. We already have the header bar, but not the overlay. Then we have the main text view, the open button, and the label. Again, adding the strictly additive. So I'm not going to add the GTK label in the middle of existing fields. And then I can do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And at this point, step 6 in the class initialization function of the text viewer window class. Yep. No. Find the newly added cursor was widget to the in the class initialization function of the text viewer window type and we go, where is it? Opening files. We can copy this from the other file because it's currently, at this point, this should be the state of the class. And we add a new GTK widget class bind template child. And we emphasize line 10. Let me double check. 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yep. Okay. At this point, we need to go into the instance initialization function instead and retrieve the buffer from the text view and connect the signal. Receive notification every time the cursor position property. Would be cool if all GTK bindings added the same tutorial as well. Yes, it would be cool. In theory, all of this is written in a way that should make it possible to replace a bunch of this stuff in with different languages. The main problem I see is some of these instructions are fairly specific to C. So it's not entirely trivial to do it. I honestly tried it. It's one of the things that I started doing on, I don't remember, during this week, basically. I started like writing it in a way that doesn't necessarily require writing C code. Like, a lot of the stuff is done in XML. The XML is exactly the same in C and Python, JavaScript, whatever I've used. Another thing that I did was trying to minimize the amount of callbacks that are actually used. So, for instance, it's one of the reasons why I moved instead of having a callback on the clicked signal of the GTK button for opening, I moved to an action because it's a lot easier to deal with, especially in other languages. The main problem is that a bunch of this stuff is actually C specific. Binding a template child in C requires getting into the class init. In Python and in Vala requires using a decorator to a field in a structure. So some of these instructions are C specific, but others are fairly generic. Like retrieving the GTK text buffer from the main text view widget and then connecting callback to notify cursor position can be done in multiple languages. Like I could actually write it like this. Let's see. Where is it? Here. I need another. Where is it? Opening files again. Yeah, I need to take this. Where are you? I need to do something like this, basically. do GTK text buffer. Oh, come on. Text viewer window cursor position self, and then I could do this. It would be instead last text viewer window. Would be after equals self main text view. Cursor position self and cursor position change. Oh, that's right. And they would be like this, like exactly like this. So it's entirely possible to do it like this. It's entirely possible to have a code code in C and a tab. It would be rendered differently. It would be a tab with the C code and a tab with the Python code, and then a tab with the Vala code and JavaScript, Rust, whatever have you. It's exactly the same. For some of this stuff is super easy. For some stuff is a lot more complicated. Like in this case, will also be something like open. What the hell? Would be open action GIO simple action this, and then open action activate stuff on open activate on open activate, and then self so it's entirely possible to do this in different languages for some of these examples. Right now I'm also sticking to C because it's easier for me to do this once and then port the code from C to other languages. Especially as you've seen, as you might have noticed, I tend to go back and fix stuff that I've already written a few times. So doing this in C and then in Python would require me to fix stuff. Would require me to fix stuff twice. Or more accurately, it would require me to remember to fix stuff twice. And my memory is terrible. That's why I write everything down. So right now I'm probably going to stick to C, but you should not interpret this in any way, shape, or form as the final form of this tutorial. The final form of this tutorial will have multiple languages, as much as I possibly can make it that happen. So we want to emphasize these last 5 lines, which are line 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 10 to 15. Now we need to write the text viewer window cursor position. Mm-hmm. And update the contents of the Okay, so now we can go back here and find the where is it? Where are you? Where the heck? Yeah. So let's get this. Construct the text creator from the position for the position of the cursor. And then find the contents. Set the new contents of the label, and that's it. So yeah, that's another thing. We should already have an image. Yes, we do. The objective this lesson is to update the contents of widget. Sorry, label every time the position of the cursor in the GTK text view by using the property notification mechanism provided by GNOME. I mean, the goal, updating the cursor position in a label is kind of, it's useful, yes, but it's also kind of a side effect of trying to teach people that properties inside GObject will notify whenever they change. and you can connect to that notification signal. So you get the chance of updating parts of your UI depending on the state of another object. So it's kind of the point of this lesson, really. It's not how do I update the cursor position, but more subtly, how do I update part of my UI or part of my application to reflect the state of another object that doesn't have any visual representation. Because once you understand that particular mechanism, then you can understand things like G-object bind property, and then you can move on to more complex things like binding settings to properties, and then after that you get things like the new list view and grid view widgets in GTK4, which are entirely based on the ability to bind state inside an object to the representation inside a widget. But this should give you the initial basic understanding of how property notification works. So, okay. Yes, getting started. Cursor position, service. Fix up. Let me rebase at this point. Okay. Oh, what? There's a getting started issue there. Here, okay. Oh yeah. No. Okay. Yeah, no, not right now. I'll have to do a little bit of surgery there. Okay. Oh, this one can be removed. We have a draft. Let's go inside the build, and we're gonna wait until the build succeeds. But yeah, basically this is mostly of what I want to get through. After the cursor position changes, there is the saving files document and then the saving state documentation. Well, the example. Saving files is going to be complicated. Yeah. Basically, the saving the saving functionality requires adding a new action, which we've already done. then we have to add a new element inside the menu here, and then requires adding a new accelerator here, which we already done. So the only thing that changes is adding a new item in the menu. And then we have the asynchronous call to save. We have to get the contents of the buffer. And then we have to start an asynchronous operation with a closure here. No, sorry. We have to start the native file chooser dialog. Then we have to handle the response ID, start the asynchronous operation, and then finish it. So it requires a little bit of structuring the contents of the lesson. So starting from removing the preferences bit from the template that is added by template, which is useless for us. Adding a new action. Adding a new action inside the window, adding a new accelerator inside the application. And then we need to define the closure data here. And then restructure the, starting from the save as, the save response, and then the asynchronous save and the completion of the synchronous operation. Since we don't have toasts, because again, libadwaita, we'll just print out the error handling. And so on and so forth. Yeah, the structure will be kind of, this would be a little bit more messy. Okay. Let's see how it renders. Oh, there is a bug. Okay. It didn't render properly. What the heck? Oh, yeah. Okay, there was a tab stack. I probably have a tab. Yeah. Not code tab, but code block. I really need to start remembering to test it locally. Okay. Okay. Yeah, we need to rebuild it. But yeah, basically the main issue here is finishing these two sessions. One is saving files, one is saving state. The saving state, I'm not entirely sure is useful as part of the getting started. That is not true. it would probably be useful because it introduces you to G settings, and G settings is kind of important because on G settings is predicated the ability to store whatever option you have in your application, and understanding how it works is kind of important. So it should be inside the getting started. But I don't know if it's... There is already an entire tutorial on saving and loading Windows state. That it's possible to follow. On the other hand, yeah, it's not a terrible idea, because a proper tutorial will tell you this is how you add a key to the setting schema, this is how you load the setting schema, how do you unload it, this is how you bind state. So yeah, will need to happen. And also, if we add the saving state document, saving state lesson after the saving file, well, after everything else, we can also add the latest open file to the state. So you close the application and then you reopen it, and it will reopen exactly the same file if it can. But that also requires changing a little bit of the... Yeah, that's gonna be fun, because if we want to do that, then we have to go back to the opening files part and add a property to the text viewer window object that contains the file currently in use, which changes the way we load files. So instead of having all that bit inside opening files, like, okay, we select a file and fine, and on a response we open a file here. Then we have the open file operation that runs everything asynchronously and does blah blah blah. So if we add a property there, we need a new section in between this that added a property to text viewer window in it, to text viewer window with the G file. And then every time you set the property on the window, the G file property on the window, it would open the file. But then at that point we enter the very interesting part of a tutorial, which is I have to explain to you how GObject properties work. And if you've seen, if you thought that, oh, this whole thing is very C oriented, then just wait until you get to the GObject properties. The other option is that instead of having, we still load the file in this way. No, we have to do it. We have to do the property loading. We cannot just use the property to change the, I don't know, the title of the window. Yeah, that would be a lot more complicated. I don't know. Maybe adding a property is part of a getting started tutorial. We want more people to use GObject properties and use GObject features in our platform. So maybe it's necessary. Yeah, that would require changing a little bit, changing this code, this lesson to include a new subsection about adding a file property to text viewer window, sorry, and moving the loading code into that property. It's not hard, but yeah, it's gonna be. Yeah, I'm not gonna be doing that right now, but it's probably something to take into consideration at this point. Okay. Docs, documentation, tutorials, beginners. Getting started. And then showing the cursor position. Okay. This is wrong. It's offset by 1. Okay. Okay. This is correct. This is correct. This is correct. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I think this is doable right now. Go loading content from file. Yeah, we changed the code to do the this entire thing has changed. Yeah, you see now we have this bit here that is injected in the middle, so we have to emphasize these lines as well. So so it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 15, 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So it's going to be 22 to 33. And then we're going to have the last here. So it's going to be 470 minus 398. Okay, it's going to be 72. Ah, no, sorry. What the fuck am I doing? 4, 5, 6, 98, 58. Oh no, again, what time? Ugh. Okay. 4, 6, 8. going to be 70 to 72. Oh, okay. Oh. I probably counted wrong anyway, so I'll have to fix it. Always takes a little bit to build the entire thing because it has to update from a base Fedora 35 Docker image, a couple of dependencies and stuff. So it's not exactly the fastest thing you can do. Right, another thing that I did in this branch that I shouldn't probably have not done, but it required moving a bunch of files anyway, so I preferred to do it inside the same kind of work, was moving the components tutorials into a separate subdirectory to avoid having a ton of files in the same location. But also because then I can move the images in a subdirectory here and here. So it's easy to reference inside the restructured text. So I don't have to do include this image from ... /../../../. And every time get confused about the location of a file. I also still plan to move the code samples as much as possible from the UI components tutorials into a separate directory that gets and then include them from the restructured text file, so they are easy to modify without having to go into weird indentations. Let's see our render. How did the render go? Okay, loading content from file. By 1. And then I added too many lines, so it's 23. And this one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines too much. So it's going to be 38. And this is 1 line too many, so it's going to be 71, 72. But it's fine. And then showing the cursor position. It's correct, 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 correct. And this one is fine. Okay, so this one is good. Let's go back to my big head. Right, and let's summarize what we've been doing today. I've managed to port, let's say half, of the work that I've done in the simple GNOME application that I've written as a tutorial during the streams of the past week, and essentially deconstruct what I've done into the documentation for the Getting Started tutorial that will appear on the website. It would be nice if it's probably a little bit too rambly to do that, but it should be possible to take what I've done in the stream, edit it down into small videos that I can then use. So you don't have to listen through or sit through a 3-hour stream of me describing how to write a GNOME application, and then get sidetracked or detour into the history of GNOME or whatever. Small videos would be nice to have. I'm actually trying to experiment with that. The main blocker is me getting acquainted with video editing. Mostly that. In theory, I could ask somebody to have a look at it. But I don't know. Oh, hi, Georges. Oh, yeah. It's almost done. Yeah, I'm just recapping. But it's Friday. It's almost done. The week is almost over. So I'm gonna finish a little bit early so that people can go out. Go out where? In a pandemic. Oh yeah, that's fine, Georges. There will be other streams, don't worry. Yeah, I want to finish this, the Getting Started tutorial. I want to finish it as quick as I physically can, and then put it online. We're locked in this room with you. Yeah, you're locked in this room with me. So, but yeah, a lot of people have been expressing interest in getting started with GTK, GNOME, libadwaita in various locations. I've been seeing messages on various social networks, various like places in the larger free and open source software community. People really want to get into the development of GNOME applications, especially now that they look so good, and they are really nice to see, to interact with the newest changes in libadwaita and GTK4. So having a Getting Started documentation when GNOME 42 is out and libadwaita is available in the runtime would be great, which means that I have about a month. And in that month, I have to finish this tutorial, make it work in a variety of settings, and then fix the templates for GNOME Builder, and then do a bunch of reviews of the UI components tutorials, and so on and so forth. So hopefully it will be done all in this month and early March. Fingers crossed. And knocking on wood. And well, that means that there will be other streams. I might also do some Q&A streams at some point. Just answering questions about the GNOME community or the history of GNOME or development with GTK or whatever else. It's not strictly necessary to do a complete stream on specific technical thing. I'm pretty sure people have questions about GNOME. So maybe I will open the floor to that. Where's the training camp for GNOME developers to be brainwashed? That's a secret. It's the same training camp where at the end of the process, large corporations give you a ton of money to destroy the Linux desktop. It's how GNOME is made. Don't click that. But yeah, basically I streaming just for documentation is documentation and coding is fine, but it's not strictly speaking a requirement. I can also do more chat like streams if people have questions. Anyway, so let's close this for YouTube. So if you have followed me here with Twitch, then thank you very much. If you have seen this video on YouTube, then I do streams on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays about writing GNOME documentation, GNOME applications, and GTK development. You should consider subscribing to my GNOME YouTube channel for more of these videos, which I usually upload on the day after the stream. Otherwise, if you want to watch these streams live when they happen, just follow me on Twitch, twitch.tv/abassi, so you get notified and you can join me writing documentation for GNOME or writing code for the GNOME project using GTK, GNOME libraries, and libadwaita. For everyone who's still here, thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Have a great rest of the day. Have a great Friday. A fantastic weekend. And we shall see each other on Monday for a new stream. Bye.